invite Ellie Jay to the stage with the speech, Embracing Insanity. Ellie Jay.
I have a long history of being called crazy. The very first person to remark upon my sanity was my own grandmother when I was roughly 2 years old. See, at the time, I was going through a phase where I would walk everywhere I went on my tiptoes, as though I was wearing a pair of tiny miniature stilettos. She turned to my mother when she first saw me do this and said, "I'm sure that child is crazy." But she was laughing at the time. Now, I don't remember this occasion, it may surprise you to learn, but I do remember many, many similar ones. My classmates all thought I was incredibly weird when, aged around 9, I pointed out that if you were to take one of the purple pogo balls that we had on the school playground and remove the ring that was around the outside for standing on, you would be left with a sort of purple rubber oval, a little bit like a rugby ball or an American football, but with rounder ends. And that if somebody was to hold this up around here when our teacher was getting angry, the resemblance would increase with every breath he took, because his bald head was almost the exact same shape, and he had the tendency to get more and more purple in the face as he shouted. This may have caused some remarks about my mental well-being at the time, but it was more than worth it to see how everybody would then smirk whenever they saw one of these pogo balls in his presence. Some of the older children did actually go as far as to pull the plastic rings off, which only added to the hilarity. It was around this time my being called crazy was a good thing. People might be completely baffled by those who thought differently to them, but they were also entertained and amused by them. So I began to lean into this. Whenever I was at school, I would take on various acts of weirdness that made people who would never normally bother interacting with me incredibly entertained. I remember one such game that earned me the friendship of all the older and, by the social standards of primary school, cooler children was to allow them to chase me around the playground with blades of grass while I screamed at them. Now, even now, I have no idea where this game came from, but it was just one other way that being completely different to them and not really caring whether it made me seem crazy could get me friends and earn me laughs. A few years after this, I discovered the internet. Now, if I am actually insane, this probably didn't help. But it was telling that all of my screen names at the time had some variation of crazy in them somewhere. I'll say no more about my past internet identities just in case anybody is planning on stalking me. But this was around that I really began to lean into the things people usually said about me. It was also the time that I started to write and post stories on the internet, mostly on forums. The two things worked better together than I could have ever imagined because my supposed insanity had a tendency to come out in humour ever since those first few playground laughs, and my natural sense of humour had been cultivated by my odd British family. Now, whether or not they are also insane can be left for a family psychologist to decide. But they introduced me to sarcasm through my mother's love of Terry Pratchett, which she read to me as a child, to complete randomness through my father's love of Douglas Adams, another not exactly bedtime story that I was exposed to, and to rudeness, thanks to my father's love of shouting at the radio whenever Gordon Brown was on the news. So naturally, I took all three of these things and put them into my stories. Through this questionable blend of uniqueness, I attracted an American audience because What I hadn't learned until then was that Americans don't appreciate sarcasm in the same way as us Brits do. Now, while most Brits will understand exactly what I mean when I say that somebody has a fun habit of cracking their knuckles, or that somebody who has been annoying me all day should have a wonderful week, most Americans will think that I either really enjoy horrible crunching noises or am incredibly forgiving. The fact that they were not used to this when I did things meant that my ordinary everyday sarcasm was to them outlandish humour that justified my strange online names and kept them interested just long enough to keep them reading. Eventually, I moved away from usernames with crazy in them and from the forums I used to pose on, but I never did forget the value of embracing your own uniqueness, and I certainly didn't get any more normal. So if anybody's ever called you insane, I suggest that you find out why and embrace it to the fullest.